episodes of Halo Season 2 are now streaming on Paramount Plus, and if you haven't seen it yet, I am going to go into some spoilers when it comes to this season. I feel like I can't really talk about it until I do address a few things, and so without further ado, let's get into it. This takes place 6 months after the events of the first season, and Master Chief, once again played by Pablo Schreiber, is noticing some stuff with the Covenant that seems to be incredibly alarming. They seem to be learning and making their advances more difficult to predict, and eventually it's going to lead to a full-blown invasion that they may or may not see coming. When he does address these concerns, however, people don't seem to listen, at the UNSC at least, but eventually the invasion does hit, and they have to make some choices, some sacrifices have to be made, and now we have the rest of the season. I didn't love the first season. I think I speak for pretty much everybody when I say that. I had some things which I liked about it. There were some things that I did not like about it. Overall, I had a very scattered time watching that season. And there were things that when I said, oh, they were good, I would have liked to see them double down upon in a future season. And at the time, they'd already announced season 2. And so going into this, I was hoping for some of those improvements. But at the same time, I also do have to maintain that this is not doing stuff like the games, which I'm at this point fine with. I'm okay with doing your own thing. For me, I've also made a very important rule to myself now, which is that try to look for what makes the essence of the games come alive rather than trying to ask for exactly the same thing, because it's very clear that the show is doing its own thing with established elements from the Halo universe. And if it's able to do those things effectively, then there's still a good show to be had in here. And having seen season 2, one thing I will say is that I did have a much better time watching this. I think it is a definitive improvement over the first season. One thing they've tried to do with the action in this particular season is try to make it as unbroken as possible. There are a few episodes in particular where there are some things happening, especially when episode 4 kicks in, which is the fall of Reach, and there are moments where the camera just doesn't cut, and there are several one-shot sequences. I thought that was really impressive, and they tried to do it as much in camera as possible, even though there's a lot of green screen and CGI elements that are present in there, and I'm sure there's a cut here and there to mask a few things, but I did find myself more impressed with it this go around, and the action is a lot more brutal, as is the whole season, honestly, because when you take into consideration the idea of characters having to make sacrifice plays, there are a lot of things in this season that feel a lot more visceral and a lot more grounded. And some of that is represented with the supporting characters as well, because aside from Master Chief, who you're like, of course, this guy's gonna probably make it to the end of the season, every other character feels like they're making a decision that could be the last decision that they make. This includes the other Spartans as well, which they did decide to give more emphasis to Kai in this season, played by Kate Kennedy. In the first season, I thought she was one of the highlights, and I was hoping more with her in season 2. They definitely listened to that because she is very much one of the main supporting characters of this one. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on with her, which again feels like every decision that she's making, it may or may not be the right decision. There's another character who they introduced in this, Corporal Perez, who is someone who is saved by Master Chief pretty early on in the season. And we're seeing a lot of the decisions that are being carried out reflected in her eyes. She is someone who has just joined the UNSC Spartan program after a mission has gone horribly wrong in the first episode of the season. And once she's getting into it, to be able to go through combat simulations and then eventually real combat, that feeling of desperation is captured very well, which is something I do have to give praise to for the entire season. They do manage to hone in on that as best as they can. That even affects the Covenant. They're on a mission to get to their Halo, and there's doubt with other, higher up members. Like, do you know what you're doing, or are you just playing us for fools? Especially with the character of Makee, who is in this season. She's alive, so I feel like I should mention that. I did mention there's spoilers in this review, and I did like all of those aspects. I did mention the visuals are better, and they are. I don't think that anything is egregiously bad in this particular season. There's a few moments where the CGI is wonky. Yes, that's still there, a few of those things, especially when you see Spartans running really fast at a couple of points. You're like, yep, That's not real running over there. But I did think it was much better. I don't think there was anything like that floating gun thingy that was in the first season. That's gone over here. So I do have to give some credit to that. And, the environments and the visual spectacle that's over here is much better realized. The acting is also a lot better. Pablo Schreiber in this I thought was way better than the first season. And I think that also has to do with the fact that this season is exploring emotional things as to what characters are going through, and all of the decisions, now that they're not necessarily just encoded with like chips in their heads, they're starting to look at it and go, maybe there are ways to do this that go beyond orders, and to be able to act upon decisions that are from the heart and which feel right, rather than just what someone says is the right thing to do, which that may or may not be the right decision. This is also a slightly streamlined season. The first season was 10 episodes. This one is 8 episodes, and they're pretty relatively quick episodes. They don't really try to miss a beat, and they're constantly moving. And I did have some fun with that. I mean, I never felt like I was, spending too much time with the scene, or something was dragging at a certain point. I think it was very consistently paced this time around, and I was consistently invested in what was going on, even if I don't think it's all as effective. And mostly that goes into something that I've mentioned as a pro so far, but it acts as a con, which is when it's dealing with the storytelling and the characterization. Because something that I mentioned was that Master Chief in this one is making some more decisions based on what feels right. But that emotional aspect of it, I don't think is as nearly effectively handled as it could be. Mostly because I don't think it's not there enough. Especially in the first half of the season. It feels like things are happening in that particular bit that go by so fast, and it's all leading into the next event, and then the next event, and then the next event, and everything is so quick that sometimes it's more focused on trying to be as engaging and quick and streamlined that it kind of loses out on a few moments which can be a little more emotionally resonant. Because the moments where it is are extremely effective, but because things are at a rapid pace this time, and because so much is happening, especially after Reach or things leading up to Reach, that I can understand why, there are things that are gone. But at the same time, if your emphasis in story is to hone in on those emotional beats, then you're missing out on that, and it does take away from what the rest of the season could be, and a more powerful season it could be. Speaking of characters and side plots, one thing that came up in the previous season as a huge criticism was the character of Kwan Ha, played by Yeren Ha. This is a character who was created for the show, and it was completely new. And in the first season, it did feel like her character was sort of tacked on. There were moments with her plotline which felt like it was from a completely different thing, and then they were added into the show in order to make something, feel a little more dense. In this season, they definitely try to do a lot more with her that's more consistent with the overall storyline of this season, and I did think that was a much needed improvement. And I think that the performance is still very good, but I can understand if you're still watching it and going, why are we spending time with this character? But at the same time, I do think that it's handled a lot better than the first season handled her. So I do have to give some credit to that. But at the same time, there's so much stuff going on with characters on the side that it can feel a little messy. There's so much stuff that sort of stacks upon each other, especially when it comes to the UNSC stuff as well. And there are decisions that are being made with Parangosky, played by Shabana Azmi, as well as someone new named Ackerson, played by Joseph Morgan, who is very good in the show, but originally when he's introduced, he seems to be a credible threat to the entire idea of things and seems to be restraining the Spartans. And eventually it's leading to missions that are proving to be extremely dangerous and unprepared. Now, when it's dealing with those things, I thought that was very effective, and I thought Ackerson was an interesting character. But eventually, post-Reach, the second half of the season that kicks in, there are so many decisions being made with those characters who are at the top of things that are very slightly handled. And I think what happened was that it just doesn't feel like there are as many developed motivations around certain things as much as they hint at. For example, some characters make some very crucial decisions that are addressed more like one-liners rather than, more important things. Not funny one-liners, obviously, but like, the idea of like, okay, by the way, this decision you made, you knew this would happen, right? It's like, I guess. Okay. Could we get some more development into that? No? Okay. I guess not. And since these are spread out throughout the season, it does make for a viewing that, while I did enjoy way more than season 1, still does feel like it's not as good as it can be. So I'm hoping that with the next season that's coming up, there are a few more things that are made, better, and a few more tweaks that do manage to make things more streamlined, even more so, but also manage to double down on the emotional stuff, because I feel like that is a huge crux of the story, especially the way this ends and going forward. I think there are a lot more things to do that could be very beneficial in that department. I'm gonna give Halo Season 2 a B. That is a bump up from the C+ of the first season. It's a little bit of an increase. So it's on the right track. And I hope that some of the issues that are there in this season are more smoothened out with this third season, if they do decide to do a third season. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. And as always, if you like this, please do subscribe. And I hope you guys enjoy the show.